Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros, of course. I'm your co-host, Big Wos, aka Wos Nando Vila, joined as
Mm.
always by my brother, fresh out of Mexico City. He's back in Los Angeles. This guy only does the best of the best. Mexico City, one of the greatest cities in the entire world, no doubt about it. Back like he never left. Nando Vila, what's going on, brother?
I almost didn't make it because I was on my way back to the airport in Mexico City. And as you know, in Mexico City, there's a ton of traffic. And as I was getting to the airport, the traffic, the time estimate just kept on going up on the GPS. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Turns out there was a fucking protest in the airport.
Mm,
They shut down the entrance of the
wow.
airport and caused like this ridiculous traffic jam. I had to get out in the highway and run
Wow.
like on the side of the highway up the airport on ramp. And then I barely made my flight, but I'm here and I'm feeling fresh and ready to go.
All right. Well, we all about the worker solidarity here at the Woke Bros. So, even though Nando almost missed his plane, we got to keep it
Yeah,
consistent and be down with
yeah,
the workers, even when it minorly inconveniences us. On
right.
today's show, the good folks at Jacobin Mag, in conjunction with YouGov, as well as an organization called the Center for Working Class Politics, which is they commissioned anyway. The Center for Working Class Politics is a sort of left wing think tank committed to research and stuff related to shit that affects the working class. Basically, them, Jacobin Mag, as well as YouGov, put together what they're calling an experimental study, the first of its kind, where they're trying to figure out politics can offer a new and powerful perspective on the working class. That was a word salad, but you get what I'm saying. Like they're basically studying the voting habits and preferences of working class people. And their findings, Nando, I gotta say, I wasn't surprised.
No,
I wasn't at all surprised. What they basically did were they sprayed a bunch of blue collar type of workers from a bunch of swing states. I think what was the total they said, Nando? 2,000?
it's like 2,000 people, which is like a more than
Right.
your typical polling thing would
Like your
do.
Pew poll will
Specific.
do. Right.
Yeah, because they would just get a sample of everyone or whatever, and this is like just working class people. So yeah, that's why it's kind of experimental.
And what they did was they peppered them with, some of the some of the talking points of the different political coalitions. They didn't say like, "Yo, this is the Republican," or "This is the Democrat," or "This is the whoever it might be." They just gave them what generally is the talking points of, say you're woke progressive, or you're populist progressive, or you're moderate woke idiot, or whatever, right? They peppered them with the different messaging that tends to come out of those groups. And if you wouldn't know, Nando, when you leave all of the weighty, annoying wokeness out of your populist messaging, it happens to be the message that resonates most effectively with working class voters.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably, I mean, they didn't do this in the study, but there's probably evidence to suggest that if you leave that messaging out, the woke messaging out, you'll do worse with educated voters. Like that's probably true
True.
as well. And it's I think this kind of thing is important, and I'm looking forward to them doing more studies kind of like this in the future, because we've talked about it a lot here that if you care about progressive change, like if you want a better healthcare system or any redistribution of wealth in this country and power, or you want, I don't know, something like a Green New Deal or anything like that we would support, or like a PRO Act to support labor unions, whatever it is, you will not do it without working class voters being part of, like, being
Exactly.
the source of the strength of the coalition, right? If you're just doing affluent suburban voters, it's never gonna happen. It's never happened in the history of mankind. It didn't happen during the New Deal. It didn't happen during the Civil Rights era. It didn't happen when the welfare states were built in Europe. It hasn't happened when, reforms were done in Latin America. Like any of that shit, it has to come from the working class, because the working class is the only class that has the self-interest in doing that. And politics eventually does flow from self-interest, in terms of like when push comes to shove, what people support is ultimately just what's in their best interest. So if you have affluent people who own a home, for example, they're going to support a politics that protects the asset value of their home. Even if they might espouse like, Black Lives Matter or like immigrants welcome here. Yeah. When push comes to shove, they're going to protect the asset value of their home. And like, that's what they care about.
They'll put the yard signs up for sure.
Yeah.
They'll put a rainbow flag on their front yard for sure. Everybody's a human. We're all people for sure. They'll put that signage up as the signal to, people to make them feel warm and fuzzy inside. But we know what they're going to support. We know what they're going to do when they go to their community council meetings. We know exactly how these people fucking behave. Like, I was listening to the podcast series, Nice White Parents. And basically they were like, yo, where you see the most segregated school districts are where? The Upper West Side, Park Slope area, Brooklyn, liberal enclaves. Straight up, the liberals, they're the only ones who live there. They're the ones governing the place. Liberals control the entire situation. And where you see the biggest outcomes in wage inequality, freaking housing disparity, school disparity, it's all liberal enclaves. It never fails.
Yeah.
But I do want to go, because the study does sort of distill some of their foundings, and here are just a couple of the takeaways here that they put in bold print. They were so nicely to do for us over at Jacobin Mag. And again, and the reason why this is important, Nando, because these are hunches that we already have, right? Like I can say empirically, right? Give you an example of two of my friends, two white boys who I love dearly. I can say like these guys are basically like brothers to me, right? One of them definitely a little bit more artsy fartsy liberal, straight up. And I don't think he's like fronting. Like this dude walks the walk and talks the talk. Like this dude would literally put his kid in the fucked up school in Brooklyn with the bad kids. Like he would actually do this shit. Right. And another one of my homies who is a union guy. And so he instinctively understands the politics of, normal blue collar guys. Like this dude is in the electricians union. However, he's just not going to go for the liberal messaging. Right.
No.
And so, I went back home and I was hanging out with one of them and he was like, yo, man, such and such. He moved to the burbs and became a right winger. And I was like, no way did he become a right winger. And then I go talk and he's referring to our union homie. And then I see him. I'm like, yo, what's this shit I hear about you, a right winger now? Like you moved to Long Island, you switching sides. He's like, I know exactly who told you that. And I was just trolling him. He's an ultra lib and he's doing all of this shit. I was just trolling him. And what he said was like, look, like, obviously I'm not a right winger, but the Dems, all they seem to care about is making sure my kid goes to school with the dress on and panties on and things of that nature. They don't give a fuck about my union guys. They don't give a fuck about working class people. All they care about is this sort of ancillary shit. And I say that as an example of just like, people don't want to hear this shit. No. And specifically in the muscular way that Dems do it, in the muscular way that their rhetoric is around some of these fringe issues. And I get that if you're a trans person, trans rights and trans people not getting fucked up and abused and all of that shit is not a fringe issue. I understand that. However, the verve with which liberal rhetoric is surrounding those types of issues just does not exist around these bread and butter issues, because we know who Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, just to name a couple of liberal Democrats, where their bread is actually buttered. We know what they're
Yeah.
going to pay lip service to and what they would never speak truth to the boss class, right? And so that's where we often talk about this disconnect. And I think what the study shows is it's not that you have to abandon your principles when it pertains to race. You can just be like, yo, man, if a cop severely fucks up, meaning he shows up to a scene, a 7-year-old has a BB gun in his hand, not a 12-year-old, and he shoots that 12-year-old down within like 10 seconds of showing up. That cop fucked up and probably needs to be punished for it. When Hillary Clinton does Mothers of the Movement at the Democratic Convention and she trots out all these black moms of kids who got popped, everybody can see through that. Like, that's bullshit, bro.
Yeah.
That's just bullshit. And so that's what I think the study is sort of speaking to.
Yeah. No, and I think, on around issues of race, there was this really weird thing that was like popular to say in 2016 and 2017 in response to Bernie Sanders' kind of universalist messaging around a lot of these issues. Like, I mean, Bernie Sanders, yeah, and that there was this like kind of instinct or this attack line on Bernie Sanders that racial problems deserve racial solutions. So like the racial wealth gap, for example, requires a race specific solution, like say reparations. Whereas like the argument that the universalist left, like a Bernie left would say, is like, if you raise the wages, like if you make like a minimum standard of wages for everyone, it will automatically be race based because there is an existing racial wealth gap. So like if you just close that gap by like lifting the floor for everyone. Math. Yeah, it's simple math. And plus it just is politically more sustainable because you got to appeal to the largest group of people possible, the most possible people. So like the more people you include in that messaging, the better. Whereas if you're doing if you're doing a messaging directly around, say, black people, which are 13% of the population, then it's like you'll get a few people from the other races, but like it's not gonna they're not gonna care about it that much because it's just not in their self-interest.
The problem with that reading that you just mentioned, race problems need race solutions, is that it treats race as this thing that exists on its own. Yeah. Instead of the function of race, which is to reinforce the class structure. You can just, it exists as a tool to serve this greater good for the bosses and our overseers, right? Like the point of, basically telling the white overseers and the poor white farmers like, yo, you're better than the blacks in the society, and that's all that should ever matter to you, is so that it obscures the view of the white poor people of that, like, yo, like the slave owners are hoarding all of the material goods produced by this damn work. They're hoarding all of it. And instead of sharing a nice portion of it with me, they tell me to be happy that I'm better than these black people. And on it goes. Like it only serves as a function to reinforce the existing class structure. And if you ignore that in every single sense, right? Of course, they want poor people in the South to care about segregation and the schools and all of that because it's tied to a material good. It's like, yo, we don't want them. We want them to be thinking about that good of being better than black people, not closing the gap between the people that make the rules and hoard the resources. No, they need to concentrate on the people at the very bottom. That's who they need to constantly be thinking about. And that's the tool that it's used for. So this idea that we're going to turn people's hearts into gold as the solution to solve a problem that's fundamentally about material goods and class is ridiculous.
Then you also get into like really weird shit about like who qualifies, like what if you're half, or what if one of your grandparents is black and then the other one is half black and then the other two are white, like you're getting into like a weird thing.
And I'm not saying, because I know there's going to be some black Americans who watch this and be like, fuck that, they promised us this, we built the country on our backs. Listen, y'all want to hash that out, that's cool. That will never be the salvation of black people, like a one-time check to the descendants of black slaves, and then poof, we've figured out the problem with the wealth inequality, and just the general inequality that exists in this country for black people and a bunch of other people. I don't know. And some people, full disclosure, I'm the descendant of Haitian immigrants. I would not be entitled to reparations, white people.
No.
Just know that it's not for all of us. A lot of
Yeah.
us would be cut out of that, and I would be completely fine with that. I'd love to see some homies get some paper in their pockets, but that can't possibly be the answer, right? Like the answer has to be redistributive on a grand scale.
Yeah. No, yeah. And it's so it's interesting what this study did. So what they did, usually polling is like, here's an issue. Do you where do you stand on it? Do you support it or are you against it? What they did is created a series of like fictitious candidates and played them against each other, right? Both, and they created the candidates based off their party identification. Like this is a, independent running as a Democrat, or like a Democrat or a Republican or whatever. Then they said like this was their race, this was their gender, and this was their job. Okay. He's a Fortune 500 CEO who's Asian, or, she's a teacher who's black or whatever, and then they created messaging around like their top issues, like what they wanted to focus on, their day one agenda, and then messaging around those top issues. And the messages broke down between 5 categories. There was the progressive populist messaging, which is kind of like the Bernie Sanders. There's the woke progressive, which is kind of like an AOC. There's the woke moderate, which is kind of like a Joyanne Reid. There's
God.
The main,
Yuck.
There's the
that's the worst kind. That's the worst of all worlds, by the way.
That's the worst kind. Yeah. There's the mainstream moderate, which is like a Joe Biden, like what he ran his campaign on. And then there's a Republican messaging, just like a straight up like right-wing messaging. And it was interesting to see which type of messaging polled highest amongst working class people. Number 1 was progressive populist. Number 2 was Republican. Okay. Number 3 was mainstream moderate, then woke progressive, then woke moderate. And like Wos, I just want to read you some of these, an example of one of these sound bites. Okay, so like this is an example of progressive populist messaging. Okay, quote: "This country belongs to all of us, not just the super rich. But for years, politicians in Washington have turned their backs on people who work for a living. We need tough leaders who won't give in to the millionaires and the lobbyists, but will fight for good jobs, good wages, and guaranteed health care for every American." That's the most popular type of messaging. And then, but the second most popular is Republican. And this is what the Republican messaging was. "What makes America great is the freedom of the American people. But today, our freedom is under threat from radical socialists, arrogant liberals, and dangerous foreign influences. We need strong leaders in Washington to protect conservative values and defend the Constitution against those who want to destroy the greatest country in the world." That's the second most type of popular type of messaging. Then, but I want to give you an example of like the woke progressive one, just to differentiate it from the populist progressive one. This is like what AOC would represent, right? This is like what she would say. "The people closest to pain should be the people closest to power. In Washington, the wealthy and the privileged make the rules. But if you're poor or an immigrant or a person of color in America, then you know how hard it is to just survive in this country. We need courageous leaders who will protect the most vulnerable, fight for justice, and make transformative change." That sounds familiar. You've seen that.
Yeah, and you know what's not going to resonate with people? The sort of victim, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Like, because they're going to think automatically
that they're not one of them. That they're not one of those victims.
Because they're gonna know instinctually, because of like, once you put the immigrants and this and that, like the people who do feel victimized by blacks and Mexicans and gays, once you put that in there, they know you're not talking to them no more.
Yeah.
They are automatically know. They're like, okay, this is not me. I am being victimized, but it's by those crazy liberals, the gays who want to turn my kids gay, the blacks and their big noses sniffing up all the air and their cool dance moves, and like, like that's who's making my life miserable. Like it's obvious who those people. Otherwise, if the messaging isn't like, bro, we know who this shit is working for. Those goddamn fat cats, your boss at your job, who acts like it's the end of the world because you was 2 minutes late, but you haven't gotten a raise in 2 years. You know, like we know who the problem is. You know, but like look, God bless AOC. You know, God knows we've been pretty hard on her the last few months or so, but the more she digs deep into this psychobabble, my imposter syndrome kicked in, and like, bro, nobody want to hear that shit.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear about imposter syndrome.
Other educated kind of, you know, urban college educated people do want to hear it, you know, but but working class people don't, you know, like I suppose if you pulled that in Brooklyn amongst people who hang out at, you know, bougie coffee shops and whatever, then that messaging will probably
plays
be pretty popular.
Great. Right.
Yeah. But not with working class people. I want to read the woke moderate because that's the Joyanne Reid or like the D-Ray Mackison kind of messaging.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Our unity is our strength and our diversity is our power. But for too long, special interests have blocked critical progress in addressing systemic racism, climate change, and access to affordable health care. We need creative leaders who will fight for our values, listen to the experts, and make real change happen. That's the least that's the least popular type. And then there's the mainstream moderate, which is like the Joe Biden, right? America, and probably Obama, to be honest. America is better than this. We have to stop demonizing each other based on which party we support, how much money we make, or the color of our skin. It's time to heal. We need common sense leaders who will stick up for working people, listen to the experts, reach across the aisles, and get things done.
Yeah, that's the classic Democrat. Don't promise a single fucking thing to anybody. And just, I bet you I'll make you feel good like a glass of milk. And again, want to just take away just read some of the takeaways from this. Great study. Working class voters prefer progressive candidates who focus primarily on bread and butter economic issues and who frame those issues in universal terms. This is especially true outside of deep blue parts of the country. Okay, and by bread and butter, we're talking about jobs, healthcare, the economy, presented in plain spoken terms, not using shit like imposter syndrome and structural racism or
the term people of color,
BIPOC, and all of this crap. Just give it to them in a universalist. Everybody needs this shit. No matter who you are, you need a good job, you need health care, and you know, we need the economy to work for everybody. Everybody needs it. It's obvious. You understand? And again, like the people who don't actually need it because their lives are so fucking cushy, all right, cool. Let them be right wingers, but like they're not representative of the greater American population. Straight up, they're in the minority, man. And so to kowtow to all these damn cone heads, pointy heads from these damn universities is just ridiculous.
No, it's
sorry, go ahead, Nando.
No, go ahead. What's the other one?
Another takeaway: populist, class-based, progressive campaign messaging appeals to working class voters at least as well as mainstream Democratic messaging, right? Which, again, like, it's not like Joe Biden's message sounds any better to the ears of the lion's share of Democratic Party voters. He just happens to be a bigger celebrity. Of course, you know, the Pope of the Democratic Party circled the wagon for his old ass, and he got it through. But it's not like his message is that much more resonant with anyone.
Yeah, no, and it was also interesting to me to see which occupations were popular for candidates. You know, like they broke it down into different. They broke it down. The politician could either be a teacher, a construction worker, a small business owner, CEO of Fortune 500 company, lawyer, or veteran. Okay, do you know which one of those was the most popular profession for a candidate amongst working class people?
I would say teacher or veteran. Those would be my guesses.
Small business owner.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
what you call it, antithetical.
Yeah,
That seems like that would, or maybe you never know. A lot of people, working class homies, fancy themselves as future small
yeah,
business owners. So that might
yeah,
be
yeah,
it. Like, I'm gonna save some shit, start my business, whatever.
yeah,
I hear that.
yeah,
Another one, yeah, that's what that. Another thing, working class voters prefer working class candidates.
yeah,
Not that small business owners, like, it's so small business owners are in that weird in between gray area, right? Like, they might employ 4 people or 3 people, but they're not
yeah,
really like capitalists.
yeah. No,
You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like, they're at the whims of, the uber capitalists, just like the rest of us, really.
yeah.
Yes, they're exploiting the labor of like 4 people in some way, but they're not like in the actual capitalist class. So they're like a tweener sort
Well,
of
and they're also
class.
just like so mythologized in the American propaganda
Oh,
model
it's
for so
disgusting.
long that like there's definitely holdover effect from that. There's just an effect, that's gonna resonate with certain people. um but yeah, like this is another result was working class voters will not punish candidates for advocating for civil rights, but when Democrats frame this struggle in a way that overshadows their commitment to delivering bread and butter goods, and when they adopt an activist inspired identity based rhetoric, they are likely to lose working class votes. Our survey turned up some very large gaps on this front. A populist candidate with a central focus on the economy earned 63% support, for example, while moderates and woke progressives with a focus on immigration or racial justice won under 50%.
Racial
Interesting.
justice is economic justice, y'all. Never
Yeah.
fucking forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of my other favorite takeaways. This is another one of my favorite takeaways because Democrats love this one. Working class non-voters are not automatic progressives, meaning there's always this idea if we just turn out, if there's turnout,
Right.
all the people that turn up are going to be these, people that want to vote progressive automatically. And that just hasn't been the case. Record fucking turnout for the last federal election, presidential election. Joe Biden won that thing by his damn whiskers. Okay.
Yeah.
He barely won that thing, record breaking turnout. So
Yeah.
get that shit up out of here.
In Virginia, just now, record turnout, or like it's the highest turnout election in like 25 years in Virginia on an off year, and the Republican won. Yeah,
Yeah.
against
So
the wet
so
noodle
all of that, yeah,
Democrats.
we just gotta find new voters, because all these new voters that we find, they gonna most likely want to roll with the Joyanne Reed messaging.
Yeah,
Like, what?
yeah,
On what planet? People who are so these people are disengaged from politics are gonna be engaged by woke liberalism,
no,
by corporate wokeness. People who
no,
don't pay attention to politics and don't even want to vote are going to be animated by the shit that comes out of college campuses. How does that
yeah,
make sense to anybody?
yeah. Yeah. Like, did you see that news story I sent you earlier in the week of like that the Navy or some shit? It's like inaugurating like a new aircraft carrier or some shit with like the first
Right,
transgender officer in the military
right.
or some shit, and it's like a whole thing that they're
Warships,
all excited about.
warships,
Yeah, yeah.
warships
Um,
that kill
but
people are
yeah,
honoring trans people. Warships,
yeah,
y'all. This is where we're
yeah.
at with liberalism.
Yeah. They named the ship after Harvey Milk, the gay
I
activist.
mean, okay, sorry, it's
I'm
not
sure I'm sure
honoring
he would.
trans people. Shouts to
No, no,
trans
no.
people, of
But
course.
it was inaugurated by a trans veteran.
Oh,
Like
got
the
you,
trans
got you, got
veteran
you.
was the
Oh, it
person
was
doing the
like, yo, this
ceremony.
is how we do it. Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But one of the things that I love about this study is because one of the things that frustrates me the most about the way political journalism is done in this country is that they see the spectrum of left to right in America in a very kind of rigid way, in that there's like left voters, there's moderate voters in the center, and then there's right-wing voters, okay, conservative voters. And the vast majority of working class people like don't fit neatly into one of those categories. They just don't. Vast majority of people, really, vast majority of people don't fit neatly into those categories. But it's especially true of working class voters that don't pay attention to politics as if it were a sporting event. That we love, like, people who like love politics,
us.
and like
we're one of those sporting event people.
Yeah. We understand like the teams, right? And like we can tell like what the issue, like what an issue, which side each party would fall on it, like just without even asking anyone. Like they could tell us like, oh, this thing happened, this is how the Democrats are going to react, this is how Republicans are going to react, whatever. The vast majority of working class people hold often contradictory views, often very extreme views, but they don't fit neatly into a partisan bucket. So like, the study puts the example of like Catholic voters who might have very progressive views on economics, right? But then they also might have they might be anti-abortion, right? They might be pro-life, which in the American political journalist's mind would mean that they're right-wingers, But is that really true? You know what I mean?
No,
like, is that really true?
Not.
Or like, a union guy from from Detroit or whatever, who's a United Auto Workers union member, might want like the PRO Act to pass, and might want Medicare for all, transformational things for the American economy, but also might want to like say like, no, we should just like shoot every immigrant in the head, like on site. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that might be true. You know what I mean? And what is that person? It's a mixed bag. You know what I mean? Right. And that's what that person is. It's a mixed bag. It's not one or the other.
And by the way, again, about 63% of workers are not white collar workers like Nando and myself, which means and again, it's a vast amount of people spread out all over the freaking country, meaning different regional cultural proclivities like that make up this group. It's not the same as, say, I don't know, Stanford, Harvard, NYU, USC, Berkeley, where all of the people who work in the fucking corporate media come from, all of the people who make our culture in Hollywood come from. That's actually small, concentrated, very easy to identify where those motherfuckers gonna go on a myriad of issues. You can run down like 1,000 issues. You can already guess where somebody out of those specific places is going to come down on, right? Whereas like you can't apply that level of precision to non-white collar workers all over the fucking country, whether it be Texas to Staten Island. Like these people are in different places. You can't put them in the same box. But yeah, man. Yeah, I have a pretty good idea about, the people that are from Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, and the like. Like, yeah, we kind of know what their bag is, fam.
Yeah. No, totally. And
sorry, Daniel Bessner.
I always make fun of him because I say he went to a lesser Ivy. He went to one of the lighter Ivies.
Yeah.
He went to Columbia.
Ivy Light.
He didn't go to Ivy Light. He didn't go to Harvard.
The diet Ivy. Zero calorie Ivy.
That's why we could be friends with him, because if he went to Harvard, Princeton, or Yale, he'd be like a total psychopath that he'd be working for Raytheon. But yeah. But yeah, I want to read this little paragraph from Matt Karp and Dustin Guastella, who participated in this study, wrote in The Guardian. They wrote, last week's elections, which we covered on this show, offered one demonstration of what happens when workers' issues are ignored. In Virginia, Democratic ex-governor Terry McAuliffe was lured into a culture war with Republican Glenn Youngkin, with Toni Morrison's novel Beloved claiming headlines in the campaign's final weeks. I mean, think about how weird that is. As economic issues disappeared from view, McAuliffe, a pragmatic woke moderate with no ability to reframe the debate, found himself swamped by working class defections. Where Biden had won Virginia voters without college degrees by 7 points, McAuliffe lost them by 20 points.
Jesus.
A 27-point swing in 1 year. That's crazy. That's just crazy. You know, and it shows that like Biden isn't like our cup of tea, but Biden doesn't get trapped into like the woke. Biden's the least woke guy in the universe, right? Like he doesn't
do it. He just doesn't do
he
it.
doesn't
He's
do
like
it.
Cuomo. I'm not a groper. I'm Italian. That's Joe
Yeah,
Biden.
exactly.
He's just
No, but Cuomo went woke. Remember, like the Cuomo,
yeah,
like the
of course.
I am a black immigrant. I am a Jew. I am a
It's
homosexual. I
like
am a
stop it.
transgender. Yeah, yeah,
Your daddy was one of the biggest big shots in the Democratic Party. Like, you got to be fucking shitting me, bro. Like, you
yeah,
were squarely at the seat of power.
yeah.
They once wanted that dude's dad to run for president, for
Oh
God's
yeah,
sake. Like, that's how powerful Mario Cuomo was in the Democratic Party. And for this guy to pretend that he's some, like, I had to get it, man. I had to get it out the mud. It's
yeah.
like ridiculous. But anyway, I would suggest that you guys check this study out. It's some pretty interesting stuff. And I know what we're doing here is very pat ourselves on the back, but it's what we got to do when we have empirical data, empirical studies, backing up the claims that we make on this damn show every single day.
Yeah, no, it's I know that Jacobin, who I work with, full disclosure, I
In
collaborate
full
with.
disclosure,
Yeah, I do a show with them every Friday. I know that this was like a big deal for them. They put a lot of work into this. They put a lot of resources behind it. These studies are not cheap. They're extremely expensive. So, and this is like the first of its kind. And hopefully there'll be many more that they'll be able to produce a lot more information about working class politics. Because like I said, if you care about anything, any progress, anything, this is the only route to do it, is to get working class voters into your coalition. The other ones, they're unreliable. Look at this last election. The suburban voters, they don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about you. They don't. They're psychopaths. All suburban people. I'm sorry, I don't mean to generalize, but a lot of them are.
but also listen, Democratic Party consultants, beware. Be on the lookout.
Yeah.
That little gravy train, that scam that y'all got running, that shit might not last long. Hopefully, if there is a God up above. Anyway, that's our show for today as I invoke the almighty Allah, Yahweh, God the Father, before we get up out of here. Make sure you become a Patreon at patreon.com/Count the Dings. Of course, check out all of our other Count the Dings offerings. Pack your knives. Cinephobe with Amin and Zach. Of course, the Friday mailbag, the OG Bomb Show. Check out all of that stuff. Nando is reviewing Succession for us, which is a big fucking deal. Loving that recap with him and Jason. Check out all of that stuff. We'll see you guys next week. We're out of here. Peace.
Later.